Good morning, everyone. Hello. Hello. I'm working on my Tower of Babel, and I thought I would share my creative process. What I'm doing here is building stripes that are slightly inclined, representing, how many people have imagined how the Great Pyramid of Cheops was built, or really how many things are built where you build from the bottom and go to the top, and an inclined plane being one of the simple machines is employed in its construction. So what I'm doing is I'm most of the time, though not all of the time, though this is relatively two-dimensional, I'm overlapping these things in a manner where the lower one overlaps the higher one. That doesn't always work that way, but that's kind of the way it is in this project. So if I have a white stripe that's above a black stripe, the black stripe piece of cardboard is added. So you see this, it juts out, the width of the cardboard. And I'm sort of building, if I had all of the cardboard in the world, would I make these just a solid stripe? Probably not. And what fun is that anyway? I do it sometimes, but down here I'm not doing it, and sometimes I'm creating little zigs and zags and things to sort of represent individual blocks. And I was sort of reminded of, damn gravity, I was reminded of, jigsaw puzzle making and things like that I used to do as a kid, and I still enjoy doing as an old man. And when I'm in the nursing home with the tubes and orderlies, giving me new depends to wear and things like that, I'm working on a jigsaw puzzle, I'll remember this conversation I had with you. I know that there's areas like right here where I have to fill the chinks with little slivers of things, and why is my brain, I know, I had two synapses, or whatever they are, in my brain just suddenly, when I said the word chinks, filling the chinks. And it reminded me of a story which was relayed to me by the teller, the subject of the story, an old roommate of mine, and it was funny and weird at the same time, and horrible, tragic, and everything else all at once. It can be everything and more. He was this friend of mine, his name is Colin, he's very excited when he reads a book. And he's excited by the subject that he's reading. And if he was reading a Victorian novel, he would end up sort of speaking in Victorian flowery language for a few days before it sort of wore off. And if he was reading a historical romance or historical book, he would be his conversation would involve not only the subject of that book, but as we all would do, we would look at the world through the eyes of, the author of the book, and his political views or historical views. And it was always kind of fun because what was neat about Colin and remains neat about him, I guess, I haven't talked to him in a while, but is his enthusiasm. He would just delight in telling me or anyone that he was with this exciting thing that he just read about. And there was a book back 40 years ago called the Foxfire book, and it involved, people getting back to the earth. That was a thing that we did back then. And, live in the woods and build your own house. And you don't need plumbing. You can make an outhouse and just deal with it that way. And you make your own compost, and you do things like that. And he was describing this at a restaurant that he was at. It was a Chinese restaurant, and he noticed over the course of the dining experience that the waiters were becoming less and less careful about what they were doing, because he noticed, the plate would be just, tossed on the table rather than set in front of the guests. And meanwhile, as this is going on, it only bothered him a little bit because he was too excited about talking about building this cabin in the woods. And it was only as he got to the point where he sort of enthusiastically talked about putting the log here and the log there, and then you have to fill the chinks. And filling chinks is a perfectly acceptable term when you're describing building a log cabin. But someone that had not read that book and maybe did not know the terminology about what the word chink meant, in that instance, a table next to them might think, God, that person is being rude about the Chinese race by using that nasty word. And once Colin realized what he had said, he was petrified that he had been not only saying it once or twice or three times, but he was saying it many times and very, very enthusiastically. And he couldn't explain it, I'm sure, very well or very effectively or whatever, and whether someone who was so offended would listen to the rational thing. You might he might have just made it worse. So he did the only thing he could do is he tipped the staff very, very well. He was not niggardly in his tipping. Now, that's another term. Niggardly was used by some politician somewhere to describe something, and it's a perfectly good word. It comes from Norway. It comes from Old English, and the etymology has nothing, it means stingy, of course. It has nothing to do with race, but some guy had to resign because it offended someone, because it sounded like, see, look at this, that fits perfectly, right like that. I'm going to cut it down here so this doesn't quite match. This is how the Mayans built those temples so perfectly. They had a big man with the scissors, and he just looked at it and he said, oh, we have to make that, do that, and cut that down, and we'll fit a piece right like that. So I've solved that riddle. A big giant with the scissors did the Mayan temples. Expect to see this in monograph in the Architectural or Archaeological Digest. You'll hear me on the news. I'll probably get a Nobel Prize. And for a Nobel Prize for archaeology goes to Pierre Gustafsson. There he is, going up to the stage to greet the King of Sweden to get his prize. And we're not niggardly in the prize giving here in Sweden. We don't give him $10 or 10 krona or whatever we have in Norway. We give him actual cash, a lot of money. Anyway, this guy had to, he could say this is a perfectly good word, and it means stingy, and it comes from Old Norse, meaning, or Old Germanic or whatever it comes from. But no, he had to resign, forced to resign, because he used a word that is a perfectly good word, but it sounds like another word. Now, he could have, couldn't he have? He could have found another word. He could have specifically chose that word in order to, because it sounded like a bad word, to mean more than it does. He could have used the word stingy if he wanted to avoid conflict. If he felt that if he realized that that was even going to happen. In retrospect, he could have redone the tape, rewound it, and used that and saved his career. But you don't think about that when you're describing things using big words. Sometimes the words you use sometimes they have hidden meaning. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you know what the hidden meaning might be. Sometimes you don't. But, words do evolve. The word gay, for example. I remember there was what do they call them? Announcers on the radio who, this is way back, where he was describing, it was the movie The Gay Divorcee, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And he was playing music from that movie. And he was lamenting the fact that the word gay was co-opted by the homosexual movement at the time, the political movement, and they took it and ruined the meaning, which the word gay before 1980 or whenever it came into popular, it wasn't really a word that was used very much. This room is so gay. It meant cheerily carefree and happy. And this room is so happy. That doesn't work. This room is so effervescent. That doesn't work. This room is so gay. Meaning, look at the nice color patterns and the bright sunshininess of your color choices and the pillow that's just tossed thusly on the couch, not arranged neatly and strictly, but just sort of gay abandon, Yes, now you can't use that word because it has this other meaning that sort of is so more loudly exists in the language that the word gay, meaning carefree and sort of happy, has been eclipsed. And this guy was lamenting that, but the way he said it was as if the political homosexual movement of that time, what it later became the gay movement, stole this word from him personally. Oh, give me a break. We could have chosen glum or some other word, but we chose that, so deal with it. We're here, we're queer, get used to it. So anyway, niggardly is a perfectly good word, meaning stingy. And I am relatively niggardly when it comes to the use of the black paper because I don't have enough of it. I used it in other things and now I'm running out and I need to finish at least one side of this piece by the opening of the show, which is going to be tomorrow. Later today, it will be put together. The other pictures that are going to be in the show have been dropped off, and I may not, depends on how many people go through the rain and sleet and dark of night to deliver their work. The people that don't live here and the people that do live here and are artists, they may not have actually done anything for this show because they're too traumatized by what's happening in the world. But because this show is called Construction Destruction, I'm feeling that I have the right to say that this is a performance piece. Right. Well, in a way it is. I mean, it's being constructed while it's on the show. That's part of it. So, yes, I would like to have had it finished completely finished, not just partially finished, by the time the show opens. But because this is going to be populated by all sorts of little tiny people and machines, some of which have yet to be made, using black and white paper. So I have to be particularly stingy and conservational. In this case, I'm being very conservative. I'm not being stingy for stingy's sake. I'm being stingy. I'm wasting as little black paper as I can because I have so few pieces of it left. With the white I can overlap and tear off and throw away as much as I want because I've got a lot of white paper, but I don't have very much of this. I will, if need be, I've got large sheets of black paper that I bought from a printer, but part of this shtick that I'm doing here involves using recycled boxes rather than store-bought, perfectly mint, perfectly virgin paper. So I am loath to use it, but I can use it to just block off big areas, and it will look the same to you and you and you and you, but to me, who knows how this is built, it will not be correct. I need to replace that with the recycled stuff. So let me just show you what this is going to look like when I'm done. So I've made little machines, trucks and stuff, using black and white cardboard. And they will exist on this background. And some will be, none are all white and none are all black. They're all made of both parts. And you will see them against, sometimes they'll be against the black, sometimes against the white, and They will overlap like this, and you will get a sense of, they will all sort of blur together. And the people that exist in this world, this is someone with a big belly, lady with a big bosom. Here's her skirt. And her head is, you can't see her head because it's behind her arm, but she's raising her hands up. This guy is, his hands are out. And this guy, what's he doing? He's shrugging his shoulders like that, and he's naked, so I've censored him for this particular piece. So some of the pieces, some of the trucks are big and some of them are small, and my original plan was to have the stripes, the things appear smaller as they go up, larger as they go down. I might still do that. They're not going to be as tiny as they will be getting up there, I don't think. I might change my mind about that. So I've got hundreds of little people to make and hundreds of little trucks to make. And the trucks, I could design these things to look like they're prehistoric, Stone Age equipment, but I don't want to do that. I want this to be sort of a modern thing, not an old, tiny one, even though the Old Testament story is old-timey. They didn't have steam shovels back then. So anyway, going up to the top, the human population working on this tower in the Bible were all working together rather than doing what they were supposed to be doing, which evidently was having intercourse with their women folk, because that was one of the reasons that God made this go away, was he didn't like the fact that they weren't populating the earth. Now, the women folk can only do that one child at a time, and it takes 9 months for that to happen. So what were the men supposed to do? They couldn't masturbate. That's the sin of Onan. So they built a tower. They builded a tower. And the tower was a tall tower and went up to the heavens, which was the other thing that God didn't like about this project. He wanted to see them having intercourse. He was a voyeuristic God, I guess. He liked to watch. So he ended up causing the lightning bolt to hit the people, and he didn't kill them, but he made them not be able to communicate with one another. So they couldn't work together to build this thing, at least not all of the people together. I'm sorry, the other reason was they were building this thing to the heavens. Now, the heavens didn't necessarily mean that they were going to go all the way up to knock on God's door. That wasn't the point, and that wasn't necessarily the meaning, because the word that was used meant the sky, or the stars. Didn't necessarily mean the actual location where God resided. It could have a less controversial meaning back then. We don't know which was the real. We just have the word. We don't know, did they mean this or that? But they now seem to think they meant that. And God didn't like the hubris of man emulating the power of God, I guess. So he didn't like that. So he made them all have different languages and they ended up dispersing and going back to making babies all day long, and not building towers, and he made them all speak different languages. So in this piece, what will happen is at the top, at the apex, you'll see a lightning bolt coming down, and you'll see people falling off. And the people that are falling off, little figures that are falling off, are humanoid-shaped things that are made of different letters from different boxes with different colors and different fonts. So here we have Roman font that's sort of italic Roman, and that's a guy who's yelling. His mouth is open there, and his nose and his chin are shown, and he's sort of yawning or yelling or something, but he's leaning back, and he has a very broad chest. Another one from that same box is this bow-legged guy with one arm up and one arm down. And this is made of an E and a J and an O and a part of a P of a different font, sort of Germanic font. And here we have an A and an A and an N be another person, and a different font with blue and gold. So these are all going to be flying off from the top. And while these people were flying on and off from the top, their women folk barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen also were thusly afflicted by having new languages that they and their husbands went off to different corners of the earth to speak their own separate language. Do we have 4 billion, or what's the population of the earth? When I was young, it was 4 billion. It's probably double that now. 8 billion people on the planet. And do we all have separate languages? No. Do you understand me? You? No. So much for that fairy tale accuracy. That's the thing about these fairy tales, and you know, they're beautiful stories in many cases. Some of them are just dumb stories. You have to have sex with your dead brother's widow. That's just because. And when Onan decided he didn't want to do that and he pulled out at the last minute, God smote him. Take that, you. I don't get it, I don't even understand it as well, I do. I understand why they felt it was important to have as many babies as you want, but why did you have to make the guy do it to his brother's wife? Incest was okay, I guess. Unless it isn't. Okay. It is interesting. I occasionally watch this. Gene Kim is his name. He's some Real Bible Believers YouTube channel, and I'm sort of astounded at, he has a big whiteboard behind him where he, with his various colored magic markers, is able to describe to his brethren the logic of the Old Testament and the New Testament and what's happening in the world outside. So the coronavirus is something that he can prove is here because of God and what God said in Revelations or Ezekiel or somewhere else. He'll cherry pick his Bible versification to do whatever he needs it to do in order to come to prove his point. And I just, if you could do that with math, I'm going to add this and that and come up with something else, because somewhere else I saw that this was a way to make 2s and 3s work. We would never get anywhere if that's how we did things. We'd still be in the caves. See, that doesn't fit. See, I have to use the Mayan technique and hire their giant with the big scissors to cut the stone to make it fit. Look at that, perfect. And again, these things I don't mind the fact that they overlap a little bit, because that's part of the shtick, because these might represent separate blocks. And I can also have my little people sort of fit inside of them like that. They don't have to be glued down. There's a little bit of depth. So what do you think of my piece and my logic and my stories? Don't be niggardly. Write down all of the words you can to describe your feelings. Let's talk about feelings. We don't do that in Minnesota. And when we do, when we're forced to talk about our feelings in Minnesota, we do it in a very funny way. I think Garrison Keillor said this, and I've watched it happen. Maybe I said it, but it was inspired by something that he said. If you're at a flea market in Minnesota and you want to buy this is a quarter of a lung. Don't ask. If I saw that on a table at a flea market and I wanted to buy it, of course I have to know how much it costs. And I don't just say, how much is that? Because that's too personal, a question to ask a stranger at a flea market. So it's worded, and it's not, maybe it's a way to pretend that you're not interested in the price of that. Maybe it's a way to sort of play it cool, baby. They'll say, how much would a guy have to pay for something like that? How much does a guy have to pay for something like that? Meaning, how much do I have to pay for that actual thing that you own right there on that table? But that's too personal. You don't say that in Minnesota. You say, how much would a guy, not meaning me, but a guy, and the word guy could in fact mean gal in Minnesota, but how much would a guy have to pay for something like that? Not that actual thing, because I know that belongs to you and I would never even think of buying something that belongs to you. Look at how well that works. There's a little bit of brown showing through, but that's okay in my world. It's the Bob Ross in me saying, it's okay. Let's put this happy little stone right there. So, how much would a guy have to pay? And where was that? Okay, so anyway, write down your feelings. Yeah, that's where it came from. Your feelings. We don't have those in Minnesota. We are cold and far above things that make you laugh or cry. We're not aloof. We're just we are actually petrified of being found out, of a guy finding out our foibles. Anyway, don't be niggardly. Write down use all the words you want to describe what you think about me or this or my theories about the big scissors being held by the big Mayan giant, or the use of the word niggardly. And the word chinks, for that matter, when describing how to build a log cabin in the woods, to make it not drafty. And the word gay. Don't forget the word gay. I am making this thing be builded. And why is the word builded used still? I like it, but I don't understand why. Why don't we modernize the King James Bible? Dr. Jean Kim, can you explain that to me with your magic markers and your whiteboard? And quoting every single word, not a phrase, but he uses this word and that word and that word. Now he actually does stick with almost a phrase, but never a complete thought. You know, they often leave off the most important part of a phrase, or an equally important part of a phrase if it doesn't fit in their plan. It's like the gun rights people. They're happy to give you the first part of the Second Amendment or the last part of the Second Amendment, but the reason that the part of the amendment that actually explains why you can carry a gun has nothing to do with protecting your house from thieves. It's to have a militia. A well-armed militia. So, if you want to have a gun, let's go to militia class every weekend. Okay, write your thoughts about that if you want to, but include how the word militia gets in there. Okay, that didn't quite fit, but it's close enough. I'll say goodbye now. I don't even know you saw what I did. Let me show you a close-up here before I sign off. So, this is sort of what it's looking like. And when I actually do jigsaw puzzles, I don't cut the little lump off to make it fit. Oh, this fits. But I just need to trim this little bit of blue off the edge. The blue's a little bit different color, but I don't care about that. So anyway, the back of this thing might end up looking like this because I don't have enough paper or enough hours in the day to do this completely, but this side will be done, even if I have to use black construction paper for that part. And then I'll come in every day and add more to it. Oh, let me show you. I did use my Puretopia piece, and here's the skyline. This is the side that you see first as you walk in, and this side is going to be the more, quote, realistic side. So you see the built city in the distance, the parts of the city that are being builded in front, And you see the things being done, and as you walked back, and this table won't be here, but you'll see the big cranes and stuff like that, and the title, Puretopia, and the people bringing down the sculpture of the painting artist who has the right of place in this society of mine, but I added clouds. So just to make the space above become a little bit more active and builded. And in my perfect world, Puretopia, the rainbows are made of straight lines. I was thinking of making the lightning be black zigzags, or maybe black curves. Maybe that would calligraphic darkening. Oh, did you listen to the darkening and thunder last night, Pierre? Oh, it was great. Where black calligraphic lines would flutter across the sky during a thunderstorm. And at the end of the storm, the rain line would come out. What do you think? Do you want to live in my world? In my head? On that note, goodbye.